What's up, guys? Welcome to today's video. We're going to talk a little bit more about the importance of making meta calls, making reads, and adapting your deck choices to tournaments, and why it's so important to your success, right? But before we get into the rest of the video, I just want a huge shout outs, Supreme Pro guys, tx1.com. You guys already know we're going to be having an insane Black Friday deal all week, even up until I think Cyber Monday. Multiple, like, I believe 10-15% discounts, and I'm also going to be releasing my own collection collab with Supreme Pro. There's going to be an insane Yugioh playmat that I'll have up here, insane Memento playmat if you guys are into that, and also another insane branded playmat. So just cool archetype playmats, some of my favorite decks in the game, and giving them some love. So if you guys are interested in that, definitely go check that out. But the entire store is gonna be off multiple percentages. So if you guys gonna want a really good deal on merchandise from Supreme Pro, then definitely go check that out, guys. Yeah, let's get into the rest of the video and talk a little bit more about making meta calls for YCSs. So as you guys can already figure out, there's two things that I feel like determine your success at events. It's deck you decide to play, and how well you play that deck, right? I think that's a common consensus among like many top players. If you ask them like, why did you do so well, it's a combination of picking the right deck and then playing the right deck choice, right? So if you guys are interested in getting help with that, definitely go check out also Inner Circle, the Metafy, in the link description box below. There's also currently updated master classes for both Yugioh and branded, two decks that I think are powerful in the meta at the moment. So you guys can also give that also some love as well in the description box below. But on that same topic, all the plugs away, I think those are the two components I mentioned before that makes or what leads to a very successful tournament run. Now, how do you I think today we're going to be focusing mainly on the technical, not the technical play aspect, but rather the deck choice aspect and why it's so important. The reason why I feel like it's a good time to talk about this is because Ycs Bologna was won by VSK9, right? A deck that was actually piloted also by multiple top players like Dinkabui. I think Joshua Schmidt also decided to play this deck. And I think the guy who ended up winning the tournament, Pierre, I think he played VSK9. Now, this deck was obviously a meta call, right? Like, these guys that showed up to Ycs Bologna didn't just played Vanquish Soul K9 on a whim, but rather this was a response into the developments of Ycs Pittsburgh, right? Ycs Pittsburgh was the most recent YCS prior to Bologna, and in that event, if you pay attention to the results, you saw that Yugioh made, I believe, 3 out of top 8, and ended up being won by Aditya, piloting it all the way to the end. What did that kind of showcase is that this was kind of like the deck to beat, especially because the E-ban, I guess you can call it an E-ban on like Barrier, also made the deck a lot more popular, right? So as a result, Yugioh was kind of like the deck that everyone knew going into Bologna, the deck to beat. Now, there's a couple things you can do. You could either one, play Yugioh branded in the mirror match and adapt your non-engine to beat the mirror, right? You saw that a lot of people are playing Ghost Spell in the main, something that wasn't previously seen in Pittsburgh, because Ghost Spell wasn't really that good into Mitsurugi Yumi. It was just low impact, right? Like, people kind of preferred to play higher impact hand traps like Droll, Fua, Meows. But those cards, if you think back to Ycs Pittsburgh, those cards that were being main decked for that event were what led to Yugioh being a great pick for Ycs Pittsburgh, because of the non-engine in the metagame, being Fua, Meows, Droll, right? Yugioh kind of thrived in that spot, and that's why I think Aditya did so well, is because and why a lot of Yugioh players did so well, and why it made a huge majority, like 37.5% of top 8, because of the fact that people's non-engine were not ready or just disrespected Yugioh heavily. However, I think in going into Bologna, you saw that kind of logic and shift, and that logic kind of shifted, right? Because people realized that Yugioh, hold up, is not a deck that they can disrespect. It's a deck that people are going to now adapt to beat, because it won the most recent YCS. And that's kind of like the not the fallacy, but kind of like the trying to always be one step ahead of everyone else to gain that sort of deck building edge, right? Because because a lot of people, especially who don't have much time to like play test, they tend to just copy like the best deck or the deck that did the best at the most recent YCS. Because Draco did so well at Pittsburgh, I think most people assume that going to Bologna, a lot of people will just play Draco. Now, a lot of top players end up doing is they try to think about, okay, if everyone switches to, Draco, what is a good answer to that? And I think a lot of conclusions were made that VS K9 is a great solution into the Draco matchup. How so? Well, Izuna being a very strong hand trap into the matchup, and the fact that you have Holy Sue, like the VS cards were just outprinting the Draco cards. Like the VS cards are so good into other mid-range decks. Like they literally demolish mid-range strategies, right? Like if you try to play a fair strategy into VS cards, you're gonna end up getting out advantage most of the time. And I think if you were to look at, like Josh's Twitter, for example, I think I was taking a look at it. I think he smoked every single Draco tier he played. He like 2-0'd or 2-1'd. More often than not, he just 2-0'd them, like just smoked them. Because why? He played Izuna, he played Ghost Spells. He just adapted his on-engine and his deck choice to just be favored into that matchup, and that was the deck he was prepped to beat, right? And if he were to play, what he expected to play, more Draco, he's gonna end up doing really well. Obviously, this strategy of trying to be a step of the meta can sometimes backfire, right? Because sometimes you just don't queue into the matchup you're looking for. Like, let's say you play the VS K9 deck, you play 0 Draco because of matchup variance. You're honestly probably going X5. I'll be honest with you. But because you expect most of the room to be playing the Draco deck, and you end up actually playing that matchup, you're gonna find yourself having that deck building edge, right? So it's not a surefire answer, or it's not like it's not gonna be always the answer, because the format is kind of interesting right now. It's kind of wide, right? Like, so if you think about it, right, like what are the decks in the format? There's Mitsurugi Yummy, there's Pure Yummy, there's VS K9, there's Draco kind of like I think the 4 top decks. But the thing is, it's kind of like each deck has a favored matchup into other decks. Like it reminds me a lot of TOS format, where like there's Orcus, there's Thunder Dragon, there's Striker, and there's Salad. It's similar to like the format we kind of have right now, where it's kind of like, if you play against certain matchups, you're gonna have a favored matchup just off your deck and your non-engine by default, right? So I think the VS K9 deck was a good solution in trying to beat all the Draco players and the rise in popularity of Draco, especially because a lot of the Draco players weren't kind of forgot how to play that matchup as well. Not because that was also another thing, is a lot of the Draco players who were not familiar with how to play into Izuna were also probably misusing their interruptions or their setup going first, where they weren't holding Femena to play around Izuna Lupus, right? Or they weren't they were just making, I'm saying that's a very I think that's something that a lot of players were just capitalizing on as well, because a lot of people were kind of copying the deck from YCS Pittsburgh, buying Draco cards and playing it for the first time, but those people just weren't having enough practice against what do they do against Izuna, how do they beat Izuna with just engine, and so they were getting super punished, right? At least that's my thing, because I don't think I don't think Izuna just beats Draco that easily. I don't think it's if you have Izuna, you auto win the matchup. I definitely don't think that's the case. Especially there are setups where you can definitely beat it if you use your interruptions correctly, or use your setup going first with Draco properly, which is more of this is a whole nother conversation. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is that the reason why I think VS K9 did so well is because a lot of players played Draco. The VS players queued into Draco and were just super favored. I would say 70-30 into the matchup, favored for VS, and they were just dominating and that's why they did so well, in my opinion. Now, it's not one thing you should take away from this conversation of trying to be ahead in terms of the meta call is that it's not the fact that the other decks are worse. It's just that the way cards interact with each other, right? If you just think about the Mitsurugi Yummy deck, also I think didn't do as well, because it just couldn't go second. Like, I think that deck just has a hard time going second, because every deck going first, in theory, does like some sort of FTK, or the deck does like a good enough end board to win the game. Like the Vanquish Soul Canine deck, like it's still very powerful at going first because the Canine cards just make it impossible for you to interact with your opponent pretty much. Like you need to draw like a Molcharmy or like a Droll and Lockbird or some sort of Floodgate hand trap to even have a chance, because or like a Nib +1, which a lot of people didn't play Nib. So like the thing with the VS Canine deck was it was very hard to interact with going for when it went first. Like I think if you watch like in the top 8 match when Josh went first in game 2, like he basically just did full combo and his opponent instantly scooped because he knows that like you're just not breaking that board, right? And that's kind of like why I think Mr. Yummy didn't do so well, because I think every deck is good enough to win going first. You just wanted a deck that had at least a better chance to go second. And I think like the VS K9 deck and the Draco Tail deck specifically, because it had 5 mana and Holy Suit in archetype hand traps that can quote unquote sack wins going second, made it just a better choice overall for the tournament. I think that the Mitsuyumi deck for the YCS is like the most high roll deck because it's really strong going first, but I would argue every deck is strong going first. Whereas the Mitsuyumi deck, when it went second, it just literally like if your opponent like, you know, probably do their setup, you just can't win. And the only times you ever win going second with Mitsuyumi, in my opinion, is if you draw like the Fua or the Droll. Pretty much almost every other time it's gonna be almost impossible. Of course, like if you play against Draco Tail, obviously if you have like Ash and Bell, you're gonna be kind of fine going second into the matchup. But that's like that, which is like I would say, you know, that's the thing. I would argue that the Draco Tail deck is probably the one deck there where when it went first, it wasn't the most oppressive. Like it definitely had a lot of counters to it. But the reason why Draco Tail, I think, made it to top 8 is just because people started siding Retail C to respect that matchup. Like that was like the one thing I noticed is like a lot of people just put in Retail C's in the side deck to respect that matchup because it just won the most recent YCS. And I think that's why like that deck didn't do as well. And then like the next, that's why like I think the VS K9 was so good because you can play the Retail C and it could also play Shifter. So it had Shifter and Retail C. So it had one extra card into the Draco Tail matchup that other deck couldn't play, which is Shifter. And then Retail C was also a good attribute for the Sue. So yeah, overall like it was just really, really strong in my opinion. But yeah, that's kind of like hopefully you guys kind of got the gist and enjoyed the discussion on why I think the VS K9 deck ultimately won Bologna. It's just that in an event where you expect everyone to be on Draco Tail, that deck was kind of like, you know, like a K9 deck just seems like the best choice. Looking back on it, I think I would have still played Draco Tail, because I think that Draco Tail was still, even though a lot of people were prepped to like a lot of people I knew were gonna play Zuna to beat and stuff, there was still ways that you could have still tried to like, you know, outplay the deck building that people were trying to accomplish, right? Like for example, in Draco Tail, if you expected a little more mirrors, you could play 3 Urgula to you know, respect the mirror a little bit more, which I saw some people started doing for Bologna. You could play cards like Double Cyclone, I think. So there was ways I think you could still make Draco Tail still like a playable deck, because you don't like, the thing about the YCSs is that in 15 rounds you don't always play, you know, all Draco Tails. You're gonna still play some Mitsuyami, you're gonna still play some like other decks, like other rogue decks. And I think like Draco Tail was really good into rogue decks because of 5 mana. So I think for a long tournament, I would rather play Draco Tail, because I know that like when I went second, because I had 5 mana, I had a chance to win against any deck, no matter what deck it was, because of 5 mana. You could argue the same with VS K9, which is the other deck that I actually thought about playing if I went to Bologna as well. Is either between VS K9 or Draco Tail for me, if I were to like look back at this event. Obviously not knowing who would have won or what would have won or how things would have gone, I think VS K9 was a deck that I actually thought about playing, and I think that deck made sense for this event. Going forward now, right, like applying the same logic, it's kind of like now will more people play VSK9, then what is the most logical counter to VSK9 to you know, be one step ahead of everyone else, right? And so that's kind of like the coolest part about Yugioh is like, you know, you're always trying to stay that step ahead and trying to figure out like the idea of like, okay, well, what's the next step? What do we do now? And but yeah, so I'm looking forward to there's Ycs Merida happening this weekend. I'm gonna be attending, so if you guys are you guys are also attending, come say hi. Definitely looking forward to meeting everyone there. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion on this topic, and if you guys like more of this type of content, let me know. And yeah, I'll see you guys more videos this week, guys. The idea is to have a lot of videos this week for you guys. I'm finally back from work, so I'm looking forward to making content for you guys again, especially during the holiday season with you guys all at home. So have a good rest of your week, and I'll see you guys in tx1.com Supreme Pro. You guys already know, with the huge discounts, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.